Welcome back to Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. Clarity, understanding, and empathy. Common values for those on the front lines charting a bold way forward for African Americans in St. Louis. Stay tuned as we talk to these change makers, visionaries, and overcomers. I'll ask the questions you want to hear and get the clarity we all need about the issues we face. That's next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. There's been a major shift in St. Louis government. The popular health director resigned. The SLDC CEO agreed to step down, and the mayor lost re-election. I sat down with each of them, Dr. Hlatshwayo Davis, Neil Richardson, and Mayor Tishaura Jones, whose father, Virvus, joined us. What would they have done differently, and how best should the city respond to the deadly tornado? The exit interviews coming up on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and the St. Louis Development Corporation.
Welcome back to another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel here on 9 PBS. And I can't tell you how excited I am. This conversation is one that I have been working to bring to fruition for probably a year or more. At least, because I saw Virvus Jones at a dinner, some fundraiser somewhere, and I said, I want to have your daughter on. Will you come? And he said, well, I will, but you have to ask her separately. And so I asked her, and I said, your daddy said yes. And so the one big reason they are here now together is because you lost your reelection. Now, had you won, I still would have tried to have you on together. Yes. But now the interview takes on a different tenor, if you will, obviously, yes. Because we are going to, this is kind of an exit interview in our minds, and I don't work for the city, but I'm so grateful to have both of you here. You represent history as a mother-daughter duo, both who have served the city of St. Louis. Have you ever added up the years between the two of you?
We were talking about that on the ride over. He started his activism back in 1963, and I came along 9 years later in 1972. And he has been assessor, committeeman, alderman, comptroller. I have been state rep, committee woman, treasurer, and mayor. So that's a good 40 plus years of political experience in this room.
And as father-daughter, I don't know of many in the country that have that can speak to that in that way.
No, they're very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Did you ever, Virvus, try to dissuade her from going into politics?
Absolutely, I did. I told her to go get the money and run.
No. Because you are trained as a educated Tishaura.
Yes, I have a degree in finance and a master's in health administration.
And you said to her, get the money? Because in finance, you could have.
Yes. I could have been making big bucks in investment banking, or
cold-hearted investment banking.
Exactly. But my heart is with the people, Carol.
Yeah, well, okay.
Well, my reason for saying that is because, I think I told her when she first got elected, I gave her advice somebody gave me, is that, in politics, it is a rough and tumble business, and you're going to get cut. So I used to tell her this parody about boxers. Mm-hmm. Boxers take a bath and wash their face in rock salt, because rock salt can control a cut. It doesn't keep you from getting cut, but it keeps the bleeding down. So if you get cut up here, you don't bleed over your eyes so you can't see. So I said, your skin ain't tough enough. You need to take a bath in rock salt if you're going to do this.
But she did it anyway.
She did it anyway. And have taken many baths in rock salt.
And have gotten cut.
Yes.
Oh, no, you're going to get cut. Yes. You're going to get cut.
It's not the question, but will you bleed out?
One of the knocks, if you will, has always been, and you and I have talked about this, has always been, he's the shadow mayor, he's advising her, and the notion being that you are not giving her good advice and that you shouldn't be in her ear in the way that people assumed that you were. First, from you, Virvus, she said to me, of course I take my father's advice. He knows what he's talking about. What say you to that long time criticism?
Well, I mean, I don't. I've been in. How many times I've been in City Hall since she was mayor? Once.
No, you don't have to
For
go
4
into.
years.
You don't have to
Right.
go into City Hall.
But my point being is that I told her, I said, if you have to ask me for advice, then you shouldn't do it. I said, because this is about you have to make the decisions, and don't you could and trust me, I give her advice, but I think I'm one of the people in the city that know more about the city charter than anybody else. Because what I did read it when I was elected alderman.
And everybody can't say that. Yeah.
And we used to classify aldermen in two different ways: the readers and the non-readers. Okay.
You could tell who the non-readers
You could
were.
tell the non-readers were because they didn't care, and most people don't read. So what I did when I came on the board of aldermen is I learned the charter. I said, okay, what does this job entail, and what can you do, and what kind of power can you have, and what can an alderman do? And what I found out is that you can do a lot. Now it's a question of like what you want to do. If you want to work, you can work, because people talk about St. Louis and the government being unmanageable. No, it's always who. It ain't what. It's who and what you are willing to do, and that whole my whole position is that you can't teach people, or people don't get audacity. It either is there or it's not there. And the audacity is that I can do something.
And what has your sense been of why that question's even on the table?
Well, they wouldn't ask it if I were a man. I'm sure George Bush got advice from his father, who was president. I'm sure that any male elected official gets advice from their parents, or any person gets advice from their parents. But at the end of the day, it's my decision.
Right.
It's my decision.
And even with Bill and Hillary Clinton, there was always upset in Arkansas because she was a woman.
Right.
Yeah, that was the sense then, that she gave him advice and she was running him, and it was because she was a woman, and there were women who did not like her, and still to this day do not like her.
Love or hate Hillary Clinton, she's a smart woman.
Yeah. Let me ask you this in this way. Did Cara Spencer win, or did you lose?
Ooh.
Both.
Both.
I mean, she did win.
Yes.
I mean, and from a standpoint of did Tishaura lose? 75% of people didn't vote.
Right.
So I don't know how to evaluate that. That's something. When I ran for comptroller in 1993, I got 46,000 votes. I don't know if 46,000 people voted. And my other candidate, my opponent, got 45,000 votes.
Right.
So more than 100,000 people voted in an election almost 20 years ago.
And that is a long time ago, and things have changed.
I know.
Right.
But,
And your response to that was, ooh, good question. Both is the answer.
Yes. I would also say that St. Louis lost. The 75% of people who just decided not to vote, they lost. But, the election process is what it is, and this is the way that we have decided that we want to select our leaders. And so the 25% of St. Louisans who came out to vote, the 68% or whatever that number was that decided that they want Ms. Spencer as their mayor, that is the result, and we will have to live with it.
Have you done an excavation, or because you and I follow each other on social media, and I love the pictures of you, and I'm not saying exactly what the photos were, but just imagine someone taking a pic, because I've done this too, picture of your feet, and the pool water is just beyond your feet, or you with a drink in your hand, or just a picture of the food. Like, I'm enjoying my life over here, people.
Exactly.
And there was a level of, y'all ain't gonna worry me.
That is exactly it.
And to describe your attitude after losing. What's your? And certainly it may have evolved since.
Well, I mean, I've had the time to talk to my therapist, to scream and cry and think about, what I could have done differently. But at the end of the day, I'm a woman of faith, and I believe that everything happens for a reason. And this is God's plan, and I will submit to whatever his plan is for my life. I also feel like this is an opportunity for me to do something different, for me to do more, for me to earn more money, because now I'm not,
a government employee.
I'm not a government employee. There are no barriers to what I can and cannot do. So I am going to be looking forward to exploring this new freedom, this liberation of public office.
What was your greatest achievement? And then we'll talk about your greatest regret.
I believe my greatest achievement achievements were a couple of things. The investments that we made in North St. Louis to repave the streets, to build more homes, to setting the stage for the growth that's going to happen over the next couple of years. Because remember, all of our American Rescue Plan Act funds are obligated, which means contracts are signed and in place. So there's nothing that anybody can do to change that. So those projects will continue. I'm also really proud of the work we did on public safety, reducing homicides by over 40% in over 4 years. And also how we have reduced gun violence with our children and the robust investment we made in children and workforce. And our Department of Health is now reaccredited. Our workforce department is reaccredited. These are things that hadn't happened in decades. And so we fixed a lot of the things that were wrong in city government and handed a well-functioning government over to the next administration.
So with the ARPA funds and with the RAM settlement money, do you wish you had spent RAM settlement money faster rather than the decisions that were made?
No, not at all, because the American Rescue Plan Act funds had a timeline.
Right. I recall that, yeah.
And the RAMS funds did not. And I'm actually glad that we didn't spend the RAMS funds, because now we see what's going on from the federal government. Mm-hmm. And now there is a cushion for the city budget should more restrictions happen and more grants be taken away from the departments. We were looking at $175 million in federal clawbacks just from the first wave of restrictions that were announced with DOJ.
And what is your greatest regret?
My greatest regret is that we didn't communicate more.
Because, and I want to stop you and say, when you talk about the reduction in homicides, we saw a campaign commercial from Cara Spencer, and she's touting certain things, and I'm looking for your campaign commercial where you say we did reduce homicides, and I believe it's out there, but the message just did not break through.
Right, because it's that old adage of people don't feel safe, and we don't even know what that means. The data is what the data is, and then for people to tap into people's fear, and fear led the day with this campaign. Fears of people getting things taken away from them when we talk about equity, fears of public safety getting worse. And with the state takeover of the police, right? All of that is based in fear, but we know what the facts are. My biggest regret is that we didn't communicate other things that we were doing more and more often, because this was also an election of severe misinformation. Misinformation was everywhere. We have everything at our fingertips with the devices that we hold in our pockets, yet we don't do the research to see if what somebody is saying is true just because we saw it on the internet.
One of those things was earlier in the campaign, Mayor Spencer implied corruption, but then during an interview in the St. Louis American, she said, no, I'm not saying there is corruption. Was that a part of the misinformation? And
absolutely, because our commercials all said that corruption. Mayor Jones was corrupt. No one went to jail. The FBI didn't indict or U.S. attorney didn't indict any of my staff or cabinet.
Were there investigations?
Yeah, but those were the investigations that I called after we discovered things were awry in certain departments.
And that's a part of communication where your office may not be communicating what you're doing.
Well, we do communicate, and it's also up to the media whether or not they want to
tell that story. Yeah, cover that story.
Right, because we send out press releases of everything that we're doing. And so in the last year, we had to shift our communications focus to actually break stories ourselves. Because we knew that the media wasn't going to cover it, so we had to cover it ourselves.
And Virvus, weigh in on the campaign itself, both your daughter's and Mayor Spencer's campaign. She's saying that they didn't communicate well, that there was a level of untruths being told, if you will. What were you observing in that time?
That's it. I mean, St. Louis has been a town that has been, racially divided since I got here in 1956. Okay, so, and it hadn't changed that much. It's changed in the context of we've had 47, 48 mayors, and 3 have been black, but we blamed everything that has happened in this city since 1950 on black people. I mean, the people that have been in charge, the people that designed the policy, the people that put the policy in place that caused North St. Louis to look like a bombed-out Dresden in World War II, were white mayors who, and they got reelected, and the crime rate, the population of the city of St. Louis. I remember Cara Spencer saying something to the effect that population has declined more than any time in this country. In the history of the city. Population in St. Louis in 1950 was 851,000 people. Mm-hmm. In the year 2000, it was 301,000. That's 500,000 people. Now, I don't think we've lost anywhere near that since 2021 to 2024. But that was what was put out there. And people kept saying, well, black people leaving the city. I said, black people left when white people left. And they left for the same reasons. They left because you deliberately cut off services to half of the city. You came up with what I call a reverse triage program. And triage in medical terms is if you get a person coming with a cut finger, you treat that cut finger and you stabilize the sucking chest wound. Well, Central West End and South St. Louis was the cut finger. We put the money in that, we fixed that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're supposed to come back and deal with the stabilized chest wound, but they never did. They let the sucking chest wound bleed out, and that's what happened in North St. Louis. North St. Louis was like that. When I came to North St. Louis, it was a bustling community. Mm-hmm. You had institutions like Homer Phillips Hospital. You had Andy Malone's Children's Home had been there since 1858. And I mean, for 138 years, you had Sumner High School. You had you had neighborhoods, and over a period of time, over a period of a year, a period I went to Vietnam and came back, St. Louis looked like Vietnam. North St. Louis did in 1 year. That was because of urban renewal. See, people think Mill Creek was the only urban renewal project, but the West End, there are vacant lots behind where I live that have been vacant for 50 years. The lot I bought and built my house on was vacant for 45 years. So this is not yesterday. These are government policies.
And this is not, in what you're saying, a Mayor Jones administration
Absolutely
created.
Not. As a matter of fact, the first mayor to ever say, I'm going to deliberately invest in North St. Louis was her. Was Tishaura. I mean, no mayor. I've seen him. I've seen mayors since Tucker, since I started paying attention in 1960, and no mayor has ever said deliberately, "I'm going to invest in North St. Louis. I'm going to put those properties back on the tax rolls. I'm going to make it a more prosperous area."
And I remember when you said it, many times you did say it, that a South Side alderman said, in effect, I'm paraphrasing, what about us?
Right.
Right. But our city can succeed and grow if over half of it is left to fail. And people want St. Louis to grow. They want population to increase. Well, you can't if you're neglecting the northern half of the city, and parts of South St. Louis have been neglected as well.
Let me ask you about something that you said to our colleagues at KWMU, that the Democratic Party has a reckoning that has to occur when it comes to progressive women and especially Black women. Explain why you say that.
Right. I said that they want our votes, but they don't want our leadership. 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris to be president, yet she lost. And we see this all across the country. There are Black women mayors who are losing re-elections in San Francisco, in Baton Rouge, here, and it's the same playbook. It's the same Trump playbook every time that leads on fear and misinformation. Because I also said in that interview that being a Black mayor is a balancing act between white fear and Black expectations. Right. Right. We talked about the white fear, the Black expectations. When we talk about anytime that I visited, and I visited several times, our neighborhood meetings in North St. Louis, there was a level of sheer frustration that was really, people were angry that they had been neglected. And then here I come saying, I'm going to invest, but they want to see those changes overnight. And there is no way that I can cure 50 years of neglect in 4 years.
You talked about, you just mentioned they don't want our leadership. Virvus, her leadership style, everybody has a leadership style. Everybody does. She's been criticized for her style. Not even just her leadership style, but
just style.
Her Twitter.
My hair.
Her hair. How do you advise her through that? And even now, to other Black women who may be seeking elected office, that they are going to be criticized for a variety of things that perhaps their white counterparts are never going to face.
Well, I mean, you just described it. It really was about race. I mean, this is about Black-white. You know, I remember when I was comptroller and was running for re-election, and I had did everything that a couple of aldermen in South St. Louis wanted me to do. You know, I mean, I had been, they wanted something in the comptroller's office. I had been, we thought reducing crime, was an important issue, right?
Because it
was.
That was in 2021. That was the leading
That's
issue,
right.
crime. And so we reduced homicides by over 40% in 4 years, which is unheard of. We reduced youth-involved shootings. We reduced violent crime all across the board. But then they moved the goalposts to potholes and trash.
St. Louis is, I said this years ago, Ray Hartman and I kind of came to this conclusion. St. Louis is a two-party city. There's a Black Democratic Party and there's a white Democratic Party. And that's where it has been for years. And compare that to Illinois. Compare that to Illinois, which has had U.S. senators, the lieutenant governor is African American, the attorney general is African American, the speaker of the Illinois House is African American, and because they in the Democratic Party in Illinois, they understand you have to have a coalition. They appreciate the coalition.
And I want to go back to what you said about moving the goalpost initially, because you brought the crime rate down, homicide rate down for certain, and then the issue becomes potholes. Then the issue really did become that snowstorm.
Right.
And do you look back and think, I thought at some point when the issue became a greater campaign issue, that maybe the streets director would fall on her sword, that something had to happen that would put the ball back in your court, because it looked to be an issue that was bringing you down, that people were very upset, although the policy is what the policy is.
Exactly. Moving of the goalposts, because every bad storm that we have had in this city, the city has never plowed residential streets. And somehow or another, I'm to blame for the weather. They're blaming Mayor Karen Bass for the fires in Los Angeles. So,
well, she did leave, and I was like, "Who? Somebody should have told her, girl, don't go." because she went out of the country, and that became a part of it. So that, and it also, some could say, is a moving of the goalpost.
It is a moving of the
Yeah.
goalpost, because if she was a white male mayor and left the country, it would have been, oh, well, he's out here garnering resources for Los Angeles.
Well, but you got fires in Los Angeles every year.
Every year.
Someplace.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, this one just happened to be one of the worst. But you've had fires in L.A. I mean, L.A. fires. It's
Right.
Los Angeles sits on a desert. Okay,
And
so
St.
it
Louis
is a
sits,
desert.
and St. Louis sits in the middle of the Midwest, and we have snowstorms.
Yeah.
So are you in that-
Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they are not. So absolutely, we could have done things differently, and I have apologized, and I absolutely feel that we could have done some things differently. But the weather was what it was. It was below freezing for weeks, and when it's below freezing, our chemicals do not work. And
it's true that you don't have smaller plows anyway to go. Is that a part of the issue? Was that a part of the issue?
we don't plow residential streets, and we never have. But that was an expectation that was levied upon me without communicating that expectation.
And some wise campaign person said, we need to turn this into an issue, and they did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
and they did.
Well, yeah.
That's fair.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
All is fair in love and politics.
Again, here's a cut.
Right.
Here's a cut.
Yeah,
Right.
you're gonna
Right.
get cut.
Yeah, you're going to get cut,
I mean,
he said.
Look, I mean, this thing started. This was about people, and I say this. I've been saying this for a long time. Look, the white developers and the white business people wanted their cornerback. I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, this all of this other stuff is just noise.
Right.
I mean, the Bob Clarks and the developers who said who in the past, before Tishaura came up with the equity indicator or index, to say that you get subsidy based upon the need of the people who live in the zip code that you want to do the development. So if you're doing a development on the corner of Lindell and
Kings Highway.
Obviously the index is going to be lower. You're going to get less money because you need less money. If you're on
There's a
Natural
wealthy
Bridge,
corner.
if
You
you're
don't
Natural
need-
Bridge and
Yeah.
Grand,
Yeah.
you need more money. Well, they said no. It should be based upon what I need.
It should be based upon my profit.
Not the need of
Right.
the city. And then I'll give you an example. We gave Whole Foods, where that Whole Food store is, they got
In the Central West End.
they got a 20-year, 23-year TIF. They spent $55 million to build that apartment building and Whole Foods. 2 years later, they sold it for $80 million. Now, we're their partner, the taxpayers, the city of St. Louis. We gave them 23 years of tax abatement. And so we didn't get a dime. So they said they
Yeah.
needed that money to build it. Well, obviously they didn't. If 2 years later you can
Right.
sell it for a $30 million
And your Whole
profit.
Foods.
And your Whole
Right.
Foods.
Right. And you're in the
no,
Central
your
West
whole
End.
your
Yeah.
whole paycheck.
Let me ask you because my producer's in the room.
Yes.
And so we can't. I got to behave. So y'all ain't getting me in trouble with
Okay.
my producer. Okay.
Oh, you shouldn't have called us. You're in trouble, man.
You knew what you were getting into.
I absolutely knew what I was getting into. What was the impact on your campaign of the problems in the SLDC office with the grant program? What was the impact on your campaign, and would you have done anything differently regarding that? Because Neil Richardson, who is going to be coming on the program as well, he is no longer the CEO, so he will be
Right.
back. He's been on this
Right.
podcast before. He'll be back to talk about what his achievements and his regrets as well.
Right. Well, I think that let's go again back to Black expectations, because a lot of the noise came from Black business owners who did not get grants or who did not get what they thought they should have.
Right.
For example, we had a barbecue joint submit a $12 million request. There was only $37 million in the pot. And they wanted $12 million for a barbecue joint. Now, I'm not saying that that's not, I'm not saying whether or not that is a good request, but still we had more requests for that particular program than we had money. We had $400 million in requests. So the need is there. If I had $400 million, absolutely we would have found a way to grant more requests. But when you have a small bucket of money, there are going to be winners and losers.
But there were issues, and Neil Richardson stood up at a luncheon and apologized.
Yes,
there definitely were issues.
Yeah, the issues. Yeah, there were issues about. We were trying to let people know what their status was in the program because we extended the deadline several times to work with the businesses in the program wait.
I love it.
So we could help them with their applications because we would get budgets, for example, that were incomplete, or the budget would say whatever I can get.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, this is public knowledge. Now you can go out on the portal and you can see people's budgets, or I need help with this portion, asking for $1.5 million of federal money. Federal money. So if it's federal dollars, we have to cross every T and dot every I so we don't get them clawed back. Now, the money that's already been out the door, 2/3 of the money is already out the door, maybe more by now. I haven't been paying attention since April. But that money is absolutely going to be circulated in the community in a way that we will see new businesses and improve businesses along Martin Luther King and Natural Bridge and all of the businesses that did receive grants.
You were going to say,
well,
and you have a limited amount of time to say it, sir.
Well, first off, this program was not done any differently than any other federal grant program that's ever been done in the city of St. Louis. When I was comptroller, I was in charge of federal grants. And federal grants does the auditing. And so when people apply for a federal grant, it is a provisional approval. It is a provisional approval based on your idea. Then you get vetted. And I can tell you, when Tishaura came into office, there was $30 million of money that had been reverted because these people who initially submitted these proposals did not survive the vetting. That happened every year that I was comptroller. Every year I've been in government, we have had reversions because once a person applies for it, you look at the application and you say it meets the requirements until you do the vetting. The vetting is they have the building that they were originally going to use. That building no longer exists. You can't get the money. The money was never misspent. The money was never given to the people. So the press, when that story was attempted to be told, the press just ignored it. They said, "Look, we don't care. This is what's happening today." I said, "But you got to. If you don't do a historical analysis of this is not being done any differently than federal grants have been done," because I was there. I mean, for 1981, when block grant came, block grant has been, and that's the same procedure they use for this program, the block grant rules. Because the federal government said when they gave the ARPA money, ARPA was to be spent using the block grant regulations. Well, the block grant regulations is what they used.
Right.
They didn't use anything differently. They didn't do it any different. And you'll go back, you'll see every year there is money left over in CDA from people who apply, who can't meet the vetting requirements.
Right.
Okay.
And they never. But when you got $400 million for $37 million, you got a lot of vetting to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the last point I got to make is that this program was Louis Reed's program. He initially put this program in the initial spending bill for ARPA back in 2021, and we had to delay the program because the original requirements were subject to corruption. So that's why we had to change the requirements along the way. So these are things that people don't even want to talk about. There was not one dime was misspent out of this program. Now, there were people who were upset that they didn't get the grants.
Very upset that they protested, yes.
And some are suing the city now. Good luck with that.
Okay, I have two more questions. And one, I want you to be brief. What doesn't Mayor Spencer know about this job?
She doesn't know that it's hard, and she's going to get blamed for everything.
My last question is for both of you, and I'll start with you, Virvus. We are asking every guest on this season of the podcast the same question It is based on the name of the show, Listen St. Louis. Who should we be listening to?
Me.
That's the best answer. Let's go home. And why?
Because I got experience. I've seen it all.
Do you think people still hold your time away against you?
Yes, but that's okay. I mean, I did what I did. You know, I'm not. I've never.
You've never shied away from it.
I've never shied away from that. You know, but you know, it is what it is. I mean, because, I mean, I think that I know how the system works. I know how to I know how the bureaucracy works, and I think that people could learn a lot from me. You know,
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that answer. Tishaura Jones, who should we be listening to?
I think you should be listening to both of us because our combined experience in city government, we now know how things work and how this bureaucracy works, and how it is the who, not the what. Because they say we have a weak mayor system. Well, the system is only as weak as the person in it.
Well, my dream has come true. I've wanted to interview the two of you because a father-daughter duo with the background that the two of you have, and really I'll add this: the personalities and the character that the two of you have. Is your Twitter account gone?
absolutely.
And why'd you take it?
I got tired of talking to people who don't know what they're talking about.
But you're still on
Facebook.
Yeah.
And I'm close to leaving Facebook too.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I'm used. I grew up in a time. I used to write the political eye. You know?
Right.
It used to take me 2 or 3 days to write it. I said because to be accurate, to be educational, and to be and to write something that people will read is hard. And I think this 280 character, this Facebook, this Instagram stuff, I think that has dumbed down people to, and I think I'm getting dumber for fooling with it. So I'm trying. This is what you call it, self-therapy, right?
I love it. And can you tell us what is next for you? And are you you're still deciding clearly?
Yeah, I'm waiting on God.
Okay.
I'm waiting on God to show me what He has for me. I truly believe that that this was also God's protection. That I don't have to lead St. Louis in some really tumultuous times that are ahead of our city right now, with what's going on at the federal level, with the state government being as intrusive as they have been by taking over the police department when the policy doesn't follow the data. There again, those are the moving of the goalposts. These are things that now I don't have to worry about. Yeah. So now I can go off and help other cities, hopefully, as they navigate some of this, and then and be a basketball mom to my 17-year-old 6'7" son.
You know what book I'm waiting for?
Stuff Aiden Says.
Stuff Aiden Says. All right, I'm waiting for that because I know you're working on other books, but I'm waiting on that one. Virvus Jones.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Tishaura, thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you both. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. We are talking to several of the main players in St. Louis city government who have left office for a variety of reasons, including Dr. Madi, as we call her, the director of the health department, who resigned. She will be a member of this, a part of this exit interview series that we are doing. So do stay tuned for all of these conversations. And we will also, here at 9 PBS, talk about Mayor Cara Spencer's 100 days. So we will be looking at that from all angles here. We thank you again for joining us. Do not forget, we want you to subscribe. I like what I'm doing, but y'all have to show them that what we are doing here is something you, in fact, enjoy and get something out of. So become a subscriber, share the podcast, like the podcast, and we absolutely enjoy your comments. So do please leave those for us as well. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.